Tech trees have a lot of different upgrades, and it can get quite complicated, so I've decided to compile the information like this. I'll be going through the entire Dark Elf tech tree and pointing out which upgrades are the best. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank our sponsor today, BuildBox. It's software that helps you build a game without needing to know any program, and it's been used to create several of the top 100 games in the App Store. And don't expect it to limit the type of games you can make either. Puzzle games, arcade games, free runners, and card games are all easily made using this product. And it comes with quite a few useful features too. There's a game wizard which helps creators make the first product quickly and with little effort. And there are multiple libraries which you can easily drag and drop into your scene. And if that's not enough, there's also an asset store with tons of free and premium assets, so you can find whatever you need to help create your 2D or 3D game. And there's many easy ways to get started too, with the classic version being an easy way to set up 2D games, and BuildBox 3 letting you make 2D and 3D games alike. And guess what? Both of these features are free, with more involved features like extra worlds and scenes, and the opportunity to publish your games to the App Store and make money from them, becoming available to you if you decide to purchase the Plus or Pro plan. So if the idea of making a game even remotely interests you, you can download BuildBox for free by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment. Remember, you need no coding or development experience to get started. But back to the Dark Elf tech tree, the way it works is fairly simple. You have to unlock the 3 main techs to start unlocking different tiers. Now at tier 1, we have some pretty interesting choices. If you plan to get a lot of black arcs and spam corsairs, +4 melee attack is pretty good. And in a very simplified sense, you can think of it as increasing the damage of the unit by about 10%. And then of course you have a bunch of upgrades to said units on the right. But unless you plan to be spamming bleak swords and corsairs the whole game, I'd recommend skipping this section since there's many other better upgrades out there. Now for a much more generalist section, the next row can be a source of a lot of money if you plan to sack a ton of settlements. And even if you don't sack that many settlements, you'll still be making quite a bit. Like for example, if you sack a tier 2 settlement and get 20,000 gold, this upgrade will give you an extra 4,000. And that means you only need to sack one major settlement every 40 turns to make 100 gold a turn. And not only that, it comes paired with an upkeep reduction to Black Ark Corsairs. And this alone is already a ton of savings, as it only takes 13 Corsairs to save 100 gold a turn. And of course, extra post-battle loot is great too. You can basically expect 200 gold from this upgrade every time you fight a battle. Now as for the next 2 combat buffs, they are actually quite good if you find yourself fighting at sea or using harpies, so feel free to take them if you're interested in that playstyle. But there's not really much else to comment, so taking a look at the last row for tier 1, we have some very notable campaign buffs. An extra 25 growth is actually sort of huge, as it lets you upgrade your newly conquered lands incredibly quickly. And also bonuses to casualty captures and control are very good, but you can basically ignore the extra income from ports. At 5%, you need 10 tier 3 ports to make an extra 100 gold a turn. But aside from that, all of these upgrades are quite good. I'd recommend taking these upgrades before moving to the next tier. And looking at the next tier, there's a lot that's extremely good here. Very notably, a flat 10% bonus to all of your early game units, and plus 15% range to your ranged infantry. Enough to bring your shorter ranged crossbows in line with other factions. Definitely a must-take upgrade, with the others being more situational based on the units that you like. The Dark Elf tree is fairly simple in that way, and here we're going to start noticing a pattern. The Dark Elf tree tends to have one upgrade for one set of units. So if you really enjoy a unit, make sure to pick up their research, because they won't be getting that many more down the line. But moving on to the next row, it's not that interesting except for this economy upgrade. It seems like it might be great, because obviously you have slaves and gold mines. The percentages are low enough where it's not actually that worth it. For example, a gold mine providing 600 gold will only give you a 90 gold bonus from it. So at 10 tier 2 economy buildings, you're only getting plus 60 gold from this. Obviously not terrible, but not as amazing as you might think. And onto the last row, the most notable upgrade is income from settlement buildings. Settlements on average will be giving you about 150 gold a pop, which means if you own a little over 3 provinces, not that much of an ask, you're already making 150 gold a turn extra. Overall, I'd recommend these upgrades before you head to the next tier. And this is where things get a little bit niche. We have a few more upgrades for your infantry, but they're honestly not that impactful, as by the time you get to tier 3, armor doesn't really matter that much. But I will say that campaign movement range is great. And on to the next row, the choice is pretty simple. Just get whatever upgrade reduces the cost of the units you're making. And the last row is a similar story. You have a bunch of upgrades that are good if you want to lean into a playstyle, but you're not really gonna get your value off of this unless you're really spamming out the specific things that it's upgrading. And even if you are, plus 5 melee attack, plus 10 extra diplomacy, or plus 5 melee defense is not really that impactful. So really the benefit of this tier comes from the base upgrades and being able to make your main units a little bit cheaper. But I wouldn't really beeline it to tier 3 unless you're specifically looking for upkeep reduction. And it gets even more niche as we head into tier 4. Most of these will not really increase the combat effectiveness of your elite units, simply because their stats are already so high. But I will say, plus 5 melee defense for Blackguard of Naggarond is notable and pretty good. Though in the end, I'd really only focus on this tier for the bottom row upgrades. You get a little bit more income from slaves, you reduce corruption, which is great when you're expanding into chaos, and if you're in the late game, extra income from settlement buildings means at least a few hundred gold extra a turn. But even if you're spamming out most of these units, I'd mostly still avoid this tier, as there are much better options earlier in the Dark Elf tech tree. Though if you do find yourself here, my recommendations are these techs. So hopefully you found this useful, and if you got to the end, you'll probably enjoy my videos on the Dwarf tech tree and the Lizardman tech tree. I go just as in depth for those as I did here. And if you have suggestions for which tree you want me to cover next, do leave a comment below. This Dark Elf tech tree rundown was suggested by one of the viewers of the last video.